Israel took advantage of those relationships just in the last 2 weeks when we had those rounds of violence, and we saw how those Arab countries appreciate the alliance with the state of Israel. So there is hope. It's not just up to one administration, one president, one mayor, or one prime minister. It has to be spread out. It has to be expressed. It has to be spoken out loudly and clear. Who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? Ignore the politically correct attempt to put everybody in one frame. Oh, all kids, please behave yourselves. It doesn't work like that. We have to call a spade a spade. We have to say who is responsible for the round of violence, who is trying to stop it, back the ones who are really trying to create peace, and maybe by that, those powers will become stronger against the bad and evil which are trying to destroy all of us.
Folks, as you know, social media censorship is growing. The best way to support our video work for Israel is to subscribe to our video newsletter on pulseofisrael.com and to share our videos. If you are already a subscriber, then thank you. 2 additional ways to connect with and support Israel, they are so simple. 1, click on this link to help us strengthen Israel by strengthening Judea and Samaria. It's simple, everybody. Just click on the website and choose the best option that works for you to strengthen Judea and Samaria. And number 2, enjoy the beauty of Israel whenever you want. No matter where you are in the world, you can enjoy our online virtual tours of Israel. Just visit israelisbeautiful.com and choose the virtual video and activity package that works for you. Shalom, shalom, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Pulse of Israel here in our eternal and ancestral homeland, the beautiful Judean hills in the land of Israel. So the 11-day conflict of violence started with rockets from Hamas is now over. We have a ceasefire, or in Arabic, it's really a hudna, because in Arabic, there is no such thing as a ceasefire. It's really regroup, rearm until the next round when you're ready. In any case, the question is, what now? And I will be speaking right now with Israeli Mayor Oded Revivi, who recently wrote a number of articles, specifically focusing on U.S. Secretary of State Blinken's visit to Israel and the position of America and its diplomacy moving from here, and where do things go from here, and Mayor Oded Revivi's vision as well. So let's bring him on. Shalom, shalom, Mayor Oded Revivi. How are you?
Fine, thank you, Avi. Great to be with you.
It's always a pleasure. So, Oded, I wanted to start with this because you recently wrote, I think it was the Jerusalem Post, an article where you focused on U.S. Secretary of State Blinken's. Basically, your message was no more moral relativism. And the title of your article is Blinken Needs to Be Clear During His Visit to Jerusalem, with the byline, both sidism from the Biden administration is a boon to Iranian proxies in Gaza who instigated and prosecuted the war. So can you elaborate? What are you referring to? What's this both sidism, moral relativism we're seeing?
I think we have to understand, and maybe people are aware of it, but the American administration, the new elected American administration, has been in office for over 100 days. It took them over 100 days to decide who is going to be their ambassador to the state of Israel. And to be quite honest, they haven't really said throughout their campaign, and also after they were elected, what is their vision? What is their policy going to be like? And in a way, they were hit by surprise all of a sudden, bothered with their internal issues, which are extremely important. And I understand that the new elected administration wants to deal with the internal issues, but all of a sudden they were hit with having to be in the middle of international affairs without having expressing their views beforehand. And here there's some confusion. Definitely when we go and explore the international community's response, when we see the rallies supporting Israel, but unfortunately the big rallies against Israel, you understand that the picture conveyed back to the international community is not the one that is really the one on the ground. And what do I mean by that? If Hamas, from the last round of violence to this round of violence, was supported by the international community in order to rebuild Gaza, in order to create hospitals, to create schools, to create working places for people, to provide for the people who don't have taken all the funds that were diverted from the international community and took them to buy and develop things that, as I talk to you, I'm still shocked, right? Some of the international community is criticizing us that Gaza is under siege. Under siege? They have developed, under this siege, needless to mention the underground tunnels, but they have developed airplanes without pilots, they have developed submarines, they have developed rockets which can be launched to 500 miles, and this is a country or a region under siege? They're not under siege. They're taking the funds, important funds, from the international community, and instead of caring after human lives, like I completely agree with those who protest and say Palestinian lives matter. I completely agree with them. But the pressure is against the state of Israel, where the pressure needs to be against Hamas, who have no value of human life. They built their launching sites underneath hospitals and kindergartens. And then when Israel needs to protect its citizens, we are criticized for shooting into a hospital because that's where the missiles were shot from. So I think that Biden administration has good intentions, but they need to make it clear. They need to say, we understand who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, and put the pressures on the ones who don't really care about human lives and about important values that I think your viewers and I definitely share, of the importance of freedom of speech, having your voice heard, being allowed to vote for who is your administration.
Yeah, just following that, I mean, one of the quotes that you brought up in your article is from State Department spokesman Ned Price, saying the U.S. condemns the rocket barrages, supports Israel's right to defend itself, and calls on all parties to restore calm. And you note, continuing the moral relativism, as he partially blamed Israel for the violence and wanted Israel to restrain its response irrespective of the assessment of Israel's own military leaders. Now, Secretary Blinken came and left already, and you're very well attuned to all diplomatic channels. Did we get any different type of message from his actual visit here, or did his visit and the messages he gave basically continue this moral relativism that the State Department was giving him before he came?
So, you know, some people count how many meetings did he have with Israeli officials, how many meetings did he have with Palestinian leaders or Egyptian leaders, and say, you see, he's way closer to you. He had 6 meetings with Israeli leaders. He only met 1 Palestinian leader. He only met 1 Egyptian leader. But I think this is exactly where the message is conveyed in the wrong direction, because he met with the Israeli leaders because we do show respect to the American administration. We do listen to the American interest, and we're willing to negotiate. We're willing to engage. Hamas, their response was, don't tell us what to do. Now, if that's the response you're getting from Hamas, who do you need to meet more times? Who do you need to convince that they should take your insight into more consideration? And this brings me back to something which has completely disturbed me the last few days, seeing the New York Times with the cover front page of the New York Times, not 1 day, not 2 days, but 3 days in a row, showing the lives of kids that were lost during the last round of violence in Gaza. And you ask yourself, who doesn't feel sorry for seeing these innocent kids being killed? But the New York Times is not innocent. It's trying to convey a message. Look at the Israeli government. They're killing innocent kids. Now, they failed to mention that 1/3 of the rockets that were launched from Gaza landed in Gaza itself, causing casualties for civilians in Gaza. They count those casualties as Israel's fault. Right. They also failed to mention that all the rockets all the records shot from Gaza were targeted towards residential areas in the state of Israel, attempting to hit innocent civilians. Israel, when attacking and defending its borders, took safety precautions, announced in advance we're going to attack here, tried to be extremely accurate only to hit those who were threatening the state of Israel. It's not a parallel picture. And when you come and say, these need to calm down and these need to calm down, it's almost like a teacher entering a class and saying, hey guys, I want your attention, please behave yourself. This is not how we deal with matters in the Middle East. When you have regimes like Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran who have absolutely no value for human lives.
So how do, just one last question on this point, how do you explain to the Biden administration, who they're smart enough, they should know, if you really care about the lives of children, then put the focus on Hamas. They're the ones causing the loss of life. It's pretty simple to understand. The facts are right there. But how come it's so hard to get that message out in a diplomatic way?
Avi, you're a professional. And whilst you were asking me this question, you couldn't withhold the smile, the grin that was overcoming the whole of your face. Because you know very well that it is not as easy as you ask it. Why? Because Israel is a strong country. Israel defends itself. And it's easy to show a picture of Israel attacking with aircraft when you have at the end of the Gaza Strip an innocent kid being killed. And that's the picture which is being conveyed. And that is my request, suggestion to the Biden administration, frame the picture in the right context. You're absolutely right. We've got the most sophisticated ammunition. We've got the most brilliant army, very high intelligence. But when you fight a battle of guerrilla, and the Americans should know it, because the Americans know exactly how deep the mud was in Vietnam, and they remember 9/11, which is not as long ago as Vietnam. When you deal with terror organizations, the rules change. And the rules in this current era has changed even more significantly because of the media. Because now all of a sudden, even Avi Abelo has got his own TV channel. 30 years ago, you wouldn't believe that you would be able to broadcast whatever you want and host on your program whoever you want, and the whole world could see it. That's the reality in which we live in today. And the terror organizations, they know it. So part of their threat, part of their challenge, part of their target was to influence the vast majority of innocent individuals with broadcasting pictures which don't really say the whole truth, and getting the public opinion on their side, and with that putting political pressure on the state of Israel. So what can we do? Duplicate Avi Ablo as many times as we can. Make sure that his viewers share his programs as many times as possible, and just, my always messages, just confuse them with the facts. You know why? Because too many facts kill a good story. And what we need to do is carry on repeating the facts time after time after time. Yes, there were kids killed in Gaza. They were killed in Gaza for two reasons. Number one is because missiles that were shot by Hamas ended up landing in the Gaza Strip itself, killing kids. And number two is because Hamas took kindergartens, hospitals, and schools as a human shield for their launching the missiles. So that's what I will do.
Right. All right, so now I want to move on to your second article, which you titled "The Rockets Stopped Flying. What Do We Do Next?" Because you end with a very powerful few sentences that I believe I believe 100% as well, and this is the message I give across, and I just want you to elaborate upon it. And you wrote as follows: "What passports we each will carry 5, 10, or 50 years from now, I can't say. But peace will come about when we recalibrate our diplomatic efforts from trying to create a new Palestinian state that may or may not result in peace, to instead achieving peace that may or may not result in a Palestinian state? Please elaborate.
Maybe I'll make it simpler. Okay? The question is, are we for a top-down process or a bottom-up process? And there are two different approaches. There are two different theories. There are those who mark the target and say, we want to have a Palestinian state. Now, how do we reach that Palestinian state? And there are those who say, we want to have a peaceful region. How do we make that peace? And it's two different targets. When you put the two together, sometimes you get confused. Now, why did I say which one are we choosing, a top-down or a bottom-up? I'll give you an example which is familiar to all of us. When we find somebody that we think we're going to fall in love with, we think that we want to share the rest of our life with them, we've got two options. One is go to that specific person, propose, and you know what? Jump to final destination, into bed the first night. How successful is that going to be? Probably not very successful. The other approach is, let's invite that person out. Let's date them. Let's start knowing them. Let's find out how much do we share in common. Is that magical word called love in between us? Only then propose, only then sign the contract of the arrangement, only then reach the final destination. Which one is going to last for longer? Now, because we're dealing with human beings, there is no shortcut for that building the trust, the acquaintance, the belief, shared feelings between one another. And when you have countries, when you have leaders, when you have organizations saying, we want you now to go into a sealed room, and we want you within 10 days, 10 months, a year, sign a peace agreement, that's a top-down approach that's imposing on the nations feelings that are not necessarily rooted all the way down. And because, again, we're dealing with human beings and we're talking about emotions, and we're talking about a lot of bad blood that is between these people, we need to build it on solid, concrete feelings and trust that will be able to reach that peaceful environment that we all dream and pray for.
So I want to end with the following actual story that took place, and I'm sure you're very familiar with it, and then hear your feedback because you're very connected, and you'll hear in a second. There is an Arab sheikh, or the head of a clan, who just lives 25 minutes, half an hour away from us, Ahmad Jabari, in the area of Hebron, one of the largest Arab clans in Hebron. And he very much does not trust Hamas. He does not trust the Palestinian Authority, and he believes in working together with the Jews, with the state of Israel even, in coexistence, because he knows that we care more about the future of his people than his own political leadership, Hamas and Palestinian Authority. He, as well as many other Arab leaders, were invited to the economic conference by the Trump administration 2 years ago. They were all threatened by the Palestinian Authority, don't go, we'll do bad things to you. Jabari went, and upon returning back to his home in Hebron, he was then abducted by the Palestinian Authority secret police and then tortured, and today he has a lisp and he limps, right? He is an example of an Arab leader on the ground who does want coexistence and is working towards that. If I'm not mistaken, he's been at your house or at your sukkah, or you've had other Arab leaders as well who know that they want to work with the Jews, even with settlers, for the benefit of their people, but yet they're very afraid and untrusting of the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. Can you elaborate upon that reality that you are witness to and part of?
I think I couldn't have asked for a better story, because it basically puts the two articles that I've written into one day-to-day life that most of the readers, most of the viewers are unfamiliar with. The Palestinian Authority, Hamas, they don't want to see people like Jabari, because they're taking all the power of their mission out of relevance. They are showing that there doesn't need to be a conflict. We can get along people to people. I had, as you mentioned in my house, an experience. I invited Palestinians. I also invited police officers and army officers because they're also in this region. The Palestinian people were so excited to see an Israeli general in real life that they were standing in queue to take selfies with the general. And as you know, when you take a selfie, you want to share it on social media. That's what they did. They were also invited to the interrogation room. They were also arrested for 4.5 days. They were also threatened, never ever put a picture of you hugging a soldier. Why? What's the crime of hugging a soldier? That's a picture. It's a picture that shows that the Israeli general is a human being. You can be next to him and hug him, and nothing will happen to you. That doesn't go along the narrative. Israel is attacking Gaza. Israel is killing innocent children in Gaza. And there you have, in a nutshell, the essence of the problem. If the people in the region, or the leaders in the region, would have really wanted to have a peaceful relationship, we could have reached it. But when you have those who don't believe in peace, who only prepare themselves from one round to another in getting more ammunition and more ammunition for a more brutal attack, we're an endless game that we unfortunately have to carry on spending our funds, investing our lives in, until there will be that leadership like Jabari that will be spread widely enough that will understand that there is enough good to share amongst everybody, and let's put the weapons aside, let's stop with the missiles and see how we can build here a better future for everybody.
So it definitely sounds from what you're saying, and this is obviously a message I give across as well, that if we'd only be allowed to work with the local Arab-Palestinian leadership so that we can have peaceful coexistence on the ground, and we can be allowed to, in a sense, overcome and not be forced to talk to Hamas and Palestinian Authority, we can be looking towards a peaceful future, not that far off. In reality, it depends upon the world stopping to, in a sense, support or enable the Palestinian Authority and or Hamas. You see any constellation in the near or far future of that coming about?
Listen, there are a lot of players involved. There's a lot of politics involved. There are a lot of interests involved. I was one of those who supported the Trump deal of the century because I thought it came with a different approach. I think the Abraham Accord is definitely trying to find those financial interests in Arab countries, and we see that they're way more substantial and way stronger than what people anticipated. Trump lost the elections. There's a new administration. Those deals haven't gone out of the window. Israel took advantage of those relationships just in the last 2 weeks when we had those rounds of violence, and we saw how those Arab countries appreciate the alliance with the State of Israel. So there is hope. It's not just up to one administration, one president, one mayor, or one prime minister. It has to be spread out. It has to be expressed. It has to be spoken out loudly and clear. Who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? Ignore the politically correct attempt to put everybody in one frame. Oh, all kids, please behave yourselves. It doesn't work like that. We have to call a spade a spade. We have to say who is responsible for the round of violence, who is trying to stop it, back the ones who are really trying to create peace, and maybe by that, those powers will become stronger against the bad and evil which are trying to destroy all of us.
Mayor Oded Revivi, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Have a good day.
Shalom, shalom. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed hearing the insights from Efrat Mayor Oded Revivi. Efrat is a community, a settlement, a proud Jewish settlement in Judea and Samaria. I am proud to be a resident, and Oded is my mayor. So it was wonderful hosting him today and hearing his insights. If you believe this insight was helpful, then please share this video. And again, folks, it's about staying attuned to those voices, giving the truth about what's going on, not necessarily believing everything you hear in the media. And again, it's unfortunately the world powers are pushing and enabling the forces that are enabling and continuing the evil, Palestinian Authority and Hamas. And here we have people on the ground that do want to live in peace with us if we can only be allowed to work with them. But as the world throws billions of dollars to help rebuild Gaza with Hamas in charge, and that goes to the pockets of corrupt officials of the Palestinian Authority who torture their own people who want coexistence to have a better future, well, that makes things impossible. So as Mayor Oded Revivi said, please help us get the message out there to the world politicians. Clarify who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, and then work accordingly and stop the moral relativism that makes the future, the present and the future, worse for all people, for all innocent Jews, Arabs, Christians, Muslims in Israel, Gaza, Judea, and Samaria, whose lives are lost because international diplomacy continues this moral relativism. Thank you, everyone, for watching. If you are not yet subscribers to the Pulse of Israel, please, to continue getting the truth from Israel via our programs, just go to pulseofisrael.com and sign up for our video newsletter. Shalom, shalom, everyone, and thanks for watching.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.